So now looking into the life cycle of some of the important parasitic platyhelminthes. The first life cycle, a quick overview of the life cycle of liver fluke that we will be looking into. Now liver fluke, as you can see, it infects two major hosts. The primary host of liver fluke is the sheep, and the secondary host of liver fluke is the snail. What do you mean by the primary host? When we say that sheep is the primary host, that means the adult liver fluke lives inside the body of the sheep. To be very specific, it lives in the bile duct of the sheep and it reproduces sexually in the sheep. So, in whichever host the parasite reproduces sexually, we call that host as a primary host. Now, you can imagine that the adult worms within the sheep's body are reproducing and they produce eggs, and as you can see, the eggs are passing out along the feces of the sheep, isn't it? And in the feces of the sheep, in a moist environment, the egg develops into the first stage larva. The first stage larva that the egg develops into outside the body of the sheep, that is in the feces or in the soil, is referred to as the miracidium. This miracidium requires a slightly aquatic environment to move around, otherwise it dies. As you can see, the body of the miracidium is covered by minute hair-like structures which are referred to as the cilia. So it is actually a free swimming larva. Now in the NEET exam they can ask you name the infective stage of liver fluke. It is in case of snail. If you take the snail under consideration, it is the miracidium that infects the body of the snail. As you can see here, the miracidium is entering into the body of the snail. Once the miracidium enters into the body of the snail, it develops into a second larval stage that is referred to as the sporocyst. So the miracidium itself transforms into a larva that is called as the sporocyst, and the third stage larva, which is referred to as the redia, the sporocyst produces the redia larva through a unique mechanism. Now inside the sporocyst there will be certain specialized cells called germ cells, and these germ cells give rise to these new larvae that are referred to as the redia larva. So it is a kind of a very peculiar type of reproduction where the larva has cells in it which is capable of giving rise to another larva. So it is considered to be a phenomenon of larval parthenogenesis, which is also sometimes referred to as pedogenesis. So like I said, the miracidium transforms into the sporocyst, whereas within the sporocyst there will be germ cells that produce new larvae which literally come out of the sporocyst by the bursting of the sporocyst, and these larvae which emerge from the sporocyst within the snail body are referred to as the redia larvae. Okay, so we discussed about three major larval stages. Now the larva that enters the body of the snail is miracidium. Miracidium, once inside the snail, transforms into the sporocyst. Within the sporocyst there are germ cells which give rise to the third larval stage, which is referred to as the redia. Similar to how the sporocyst gave rise to redia, inside the redia also you can see there are certain germ cells which give rise to the next larval stage, which is the fourth larval stage, which is referred to as the cercaria. Now it is this larva that comes out of the snail body. See, again another neat question: which is the larval stage which emerges from the snail body? So you have to remember it is the fourth larval stage, which is called the cercaria, which has a tail. You can easily remember it has a tail. That means it is motile. It finally escapes from the body of the snail, and notice how it is attached to a blade of a grass. It comes out of the snail's body, it attaches to the blades of a grass and develops a cyst wall around itself. This cercaria, which develops a cyst wall around itself, is now referred to as the metacercaria. Please remember, the metacercaria is the fifth and the final larval stage, which is infective to the sheep, isn't it? And it is easy to remember because these metacercaria, I told you, where are they attached? They are attached to a blade of grass. Now what does the sheep consume? The sheep is a herbivore, it is a grazing animal, so it feeds on the grass. When it feeds on the grass, what is entering into the body of the sheep? The metacercaria is being swallowed by the sheep's body, and within the sheep's body, in a matter of about 3 to 4 months, these metacercaria will be escaping from their cyst wall and they will transform into the adult liver fluke. So from the time the sheep consumes these metacercaria, which are attached to a blade of grass, to the time the adults become sexually mature, they develop into the adults, and the adults are ready for reproduction, it takes about 3 to 4 months time, or about 10 to 12 weeks time, and then the cycle repeats itself. So what are the highlights you have to remember here? Like I said, the stage which affects the sheep, the snail, is referred to as the miracidium. Inside the snail's body, like I told you, the miracidium develops into the sporocyst. The sporocyst gives rise to the redia. The redia gives rise to the cercaria. The cercaria escapes from the body of the snail, attaches to a blade of grass to form metacercaria, and the metacercaria is consumed by the sheep, by the grazing animal, and it enters the body of the sheep. And the time duration from the entry of metacercaria to the development of the adult sexually mature worms is about 3 to 4 months. Okay, so this was a brief overview of the life cycle of liver fluke. In the next slide, we will be learning about the life cycle of the pork tapeworm. The scientific name of pork tapeworm is Taenia solium. It is called the pork tapeworm because the intermediate host in case of this tapeworm is the pig. Again, here we call human being as the primary host because the adult tapeworm, see this adult tapeworm, all of you, it is sitting inside the small intestine of the human body. So we consider the human body as the primary host in this particular case, whereas the pig is considered to be the secondary, not secondary because it doesn't reproduce in the body of the pig, it only is acting as an intermediate host. So notice how in the small intestine of the human, these tapeworms are located and they generate a lot of eggs, isn't it? The eggs are passed out along with the feces of the infected human. So the infected human has the worm sitting in his small intestine. The worms give out these eggs, the embryonated eggs, which have embryo inside them, and these eggs pass out along with the feces of the human being. And you know that pigs survive in highly unsanitary conditions, so these eggs, or the embryonated eggs, make their way into the body of the pig. Actually, if you magnify these eggs, which are basically present in the feces or in the soil, they are not really eggs because they have a protective covering on the outside, and they already have a larva that is developed inside. The larva has 6 hook-like structures on its surface, and we call this infective larva as the hexacanth larva, and this hexacanth larva along with the covering is referred to as the oncosphere. So this, which is let out along with the feces of the infected person, is called as the oncosphere. It has a protective wall on the outside, and it has a larva that is sitting inside, which is referred to as the hexacanth larva because it has 6 chitinous hook-like structures. So who consumes these hexacanth larvae or oncospheres? It is the pig that consumes these hexacanth larvae. And you know what happens to these eggs once the pig eats these eggs? The oncosphere, I told you that there is an outer covering around the hexacanth larva. This covering gets dissolved in the stomach of the pig, and then these oncospheres are liberated and they reach the muscle of the pig. See, the oncospheres reach the muscle of the pig, and there they develop into fluid-filled larvae, which are referred to as the cysticercus. Another name for cysticercus is bladder worm. So where is this happening? These larvae are developing in the muscle of the pig. I told you that the pig swallows these embryonated eggs inside the stomach of the pig. I told you that these hexacanth larvae, which have 6 chitinous hooks on them, will be set free. They will bore into the wall of the stomach. They will reach all the way into the muscle, and in the muscle, the hexacanth larvae will transform into these bladder-like fluid-filled larval stages, which are referred to as the cysticercus or the bladder worm. The cysticercus or the bladder worm in the muscle of the pig can survive for about 5 to 6 years, for a very long duration. Now imagine a person consumes this kind of a contaminated meat, the meat of the pig which has the cysticercus or bladder worm. Then he will be swallowing the bladder worms into his system. So basically, the infected pork, the improperly cooked pork, which contains these larval stages, these fluid-filled larval stages, which are referred to as the cysticercus or the bladder worm can make its way into the human body when a human consumes improperly cooked pork, or pork which is nothing but the muscle or the meat of the pig which is infected with the cysticercus or the bladder worm. Now once he consumes this cysticercus larvae, again it takes about 3 to 4 months for these larvae to reach the small intestine and transform into the adult tapeworm, and the same cycle will repeat all over again. So which is the stage which enters into the pig body? The stage which enters into the body of the pig is called oncosphere or the hexacanth larva. Now once the pig swallows these oncosphere or hexacanth larva, in the stomach of the pig, I told you, these larvae are set free. They enter into the circulation and they reach the muscle of the pig. What do they become once they reach the muscle of the pig? They become these fluid filled larvae called cysticercus or bladder worm. And such a muscle of the pig, which is the meat of the pig which contains these larvae, when it is consumed without cooking properly, improperly cooked pork, the person will be ingesting these cysticercus or bladder worm, which in another 3 to 4 months will transform into the adult worm in the small intestine of this particular host, and thus the host who was healthy, because he consumed this improperly cooked infected pork which is called the measly pork. Remember, the pork which has the cysticercus or bladder worm are referred to as the measly pork. Because he consumed these measly pork, he becomes now an infected primary host. Okay, so this was about the life cycle of the liver fluke as well as the Taenia solium.